The British monarch's gold state coach is instantly recognisable and looks like something out of a fairy tale, but I'll bet you Cinderella's ride had nothing on this. In this video from History Calling, I'm going to share with you the incredible history behind this world-famous object, from its creation for George III to the symbolism behind its ostentatious decorations. I'll disclose how much of it is really gold, tell you the dramatic story of the day it was attacked by a mob with the then monarch inside it, and reveal where it was hidden during World War II to protect it from Nazi bombs. Finally, I'll explain why, despite its fame and beauty, this coach is actually very unpopular amongst the royals, and share the disparaging comments that 4 monarchs have made about it, including the late Queen Elizabeth II. So sit back and relax, and let's find out what it's like to travel like a king or queen. The Gold State Coach was originally commissioned in 1760 by the Earl of Huntingdon, who was then the Master of the Horse to the new King George III, with the intention that it be used during the celebrations for George's marriage to Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz and then at their coronation, both of which took place in 1761. Unfortunately, the project turned out to be much more complex than originally envisioned, and the coach wasn't ready in time. Instead, it had its first outing on the 25th of November 1762 for the state opening of Parliament, when it was pulled by 8 cream horses. The coach was designed by William Chambers and built by Samuel Butler, and it cost a staggering £7,562. To put that in context, the Bank of England's inflation calculator estimates that that amount would be the equivalent of about £1.25 million in 2023. It is physically huge. I've actually seen a few different measurements given for it, which is funny to me because I'm sure it's not growing or shrinking, but those provided by the Royal Collection are 7 by 3.6 metres with a height of nearly 4 metres. It weighs in at almost 4 tonnes, and its required team of 8 horses can only pull it at a walking pace. I'm afraid I have to tell you that it is not made of gold, as this metal is too soft and heavy to be used in this way, and instead it is gilt wood, meaning gold leaf over the top of a wooden frame. The interior is furnished with red satin and velvet, though these plush fabrics don't do as good a job as you might think at making it a comfortable ride, but more on that shortly. The exterior decorations are what make this coach so striking, and I don't just mean the gold leaf, which makes it gleam even on the rainiest English day. The cabin is made from 8 palm trees, 1 at each corner, then 2 down the centre on each side, which support the roof. And just to be clear, I'm not saying they're real palm trees, they're just gilded wood in the shape of these trees. If we look at the tops of the corner palms, we can see that they boast helmets with elaborate plumes on them, with shields, swords and spears beneath. The trees are rooted in lions' heads, which are at roughly the level of the seats inside. In the centre of the roof, there are 3 cherubic-looking little boys, who are meant to represent England, Ireland and Scotland. Sorry Wales, apparently you get lumped in with England. They are holding up the imperial state crown of Great Britain, as well as the sceptre, sword of state and the insignia of knighthood. Laurel leaves spread out from this centre ornament to the 4 corner palms. There are 4 huge sea gods on the carriage. Think of Ariel's father in The Little Mermaid and you're on the right track. 2 are positioned at the front and 2 at the back. Together they represent Britain's sea power. The 2 at the front are blowing on conch shells, announcing the approach of the monarch, and are presented in the action of pulling the carriage. The 2 at the back are winged as well as having their fishtails, and they hold tridents in their hands. They are there to protect the occupants from an attack from the rear. Next, we come to the painted panels around the base of the cabin, which are positioned at about head height for adults, so that those the carriage passes by can see them. These were created by Florentine artist Giovanni Battista Cipriani and depict mythological characters intermixed with real locations and objects. At the front of the carriage, we see the figure of Victory, presenting a garland of laurel to an enthroned Britannia, who is holding a staff of liberty. They are surrounded by other figures meant to represent religion, justice, wisdom, valour, fortitude, commerce, and plenty. If we look in the background, we can see the River Thames and the famous dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. Before we hear about the rest of the coach's decor, if you're enjoying this content, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel with notifications switched on so you never miss one of my uploads. You can also find me over on Instagram and on Patreon, where I post bonus content including early access to ad-free videos and mini podcasts. Thank you as always to those of you who already support me as patrons and to those who make one-off donations to the channel using the thanks button underneath videos, as your generosity helps me to make this a full-time job. And now, back to the Gold State Coach. Switching to the back of the vehicle, we find two panels. The upper shows the royal arms with the Order of St. George to represent England, a rose, also England, a shamrock for Ireland, and a thistle for Scotland. The lower shows the sea god, another one, Neptune, holding a trident and standing next to the sea goddess Amphitrite, as they are pulled along by seahorses while other gods and naiads swim around them. Now, I got this reference to Amphitrite from a 1954 description of the coach available on the Royal Mews website, but I think it's actually a little error. Amphitrite is from Greek mythology and was the wife of the Greek sea god Poseidon, while Neptune is Poseidon's Roman equivalent and was married to Cilicia. So I suspect we're meant to be looking at Neptune and Cilicia here rather than Poseidon and Amphitrite, as Cipriani seems to have favoured Roman over Greek mythology, and I definitely don't think he would have mixed pantheons within the same panel. I could be wrong though. Moving on to the doors of the coach. On the left side, we see the gods Mars and Mercury, along with the goddess Minerva, holding the imperial crown of Great Britain. Mars was the god of war, but here we see a scene of peace, suggesting the peace that George III's reign would hopefully bring to Great Britain. It didn't exactly work out that way, but the coach was created many years before the likes of the American Revolution, so let's just applaud the designer's optimism here. Mercury was the messenger of the gods, if you're interested, and Minerva was the goddess of wisdom. All three are from Roman mythology. On the panels on either side of the main scene, we see the arts and sciences, represented by some scantily clad women and winged children holding paintbrushes, books, a telescope, and what looks like a flute. In the centre of the right door, we see two figures, which the 1954 description says are, quote, industry and ingenuity giving a cornucopia to the genius of England, end quote. I'm glad I have that explanation available to me, as I wouldn't have worked out from just looking at this picture what that's meant to be, but apparently that's what it is. To our left is a figure meant to be history, writing up the historical record. Now there's a person I could be friends with. And we see peace on the other side, holding a laurel branch and burning weapons which would otherwise be used for war. I think I get along with her as well. The coach has been used at some of the most iconic events in British history, including many a state opening of Parliament. It was during one such journey to the House of Lords by its first owner, George III, on the 29th of October 1795, that the incident you see shown here occurred, when the coach was attacked by an angry mob of Republicans. The Times newspaper provided a dramatic rendition of the story, saying in an article published on the 30th of October, "It is with a considerable degree of uneasiness that we have to state to the public the outrages committed yesterday against His Majesty as he was passing to the House of Lords by the most numerous mob we ever witnessed. All the avenues leading to the palace yard as well as the park were crowded with people, most of them of the very lowest order, who insulted the king most grossly by hootings and groans and calling out for 'Peace, peace, down with George.' Though we have no reason but to suppose that the majority of the crowd was drawn together by curiosity only, yet it is evident that there were among it many rioters and disaffected persons, who hoped to conceal their horrid purposes by mixing with the throng. In the course of the King's progress from St. James's to the House of Lords, several stones and other articles were thrown, 9 of which, it appears by the report of the attendants, the peace officers and others, reached the King's carriage, which 2 of the thick plate glass panels are broken. One in particular is described and supposed to come from the bow window of a house, the corner of Margaret Street next the Abbey. Another was thrown as the carriage on return was passing under the gateway of St. James's Park. For the former offence, a lad of decent appearance, apprentice to a jeweller in the city, was immediately taken into custody, and after an examination at the palace before Justice Bond, was sent to prison. As the King was afterwards going to Buckingham House to dinner, attended only by 2 servants behind his coach, a party of the mob filled up the road, and just under the garden wall prevented the passing of the carriage. But some lifeguards mounted, returning home from duty, being informed of this interruption, they immediately rode back and prevented further dilemma by seeing the King safely to Buckingham House. Previous, however, to the guards coming to His Majesty's assistance, one of the mob threw a stone through the window, which passed along close to His Majesty's face, but without doing any mischief. The constables took a man into custody, suspected of the offence. One young man was taken into custody, supposed to have thrown one of the stones at the King's carriage, and Lords Westmoreland and Onslow having acquainted the House of Peers of the indignities offered to His Majesty, the House immediately resolved on an inquiry, and the young man was brought up and examined. What passed we have only from report, as the doors were kept shut, but we learn that 5 persons were examined as witnesses of what they had observed during the procession to the house. These were Mr. Stockdale, bookseller, Mr. Walford, haberdasher, Mr. Sayer, Mr. Palmer, and a footman. They gave a general description of their observations, but could not charge the prisoner with throwing a stone, but only with uttering seditious expressions. The man is committed. The attack on the coach was also recorded in the Journal of Daily Occurrences within the Royal Mews, though it got a much shorter recounting there than in the Times. The diary said only that the King went to the House of Lords in the usual state to open the session of Parliament. NB, which is short for nota bene and means an extra little note or piece of information. This was the day on which His Majesty was insulted by the O mob. It's hard to read the handwriting here, but I swear it looks like O mob or Q mob, and all the glasses of the state coach were broken. The attack is the most serious incident I am aware of involving the coach, and I imagine when George was being pelted with stones and the windows were coming in around him, he wished his mode of transport wasn't so heavy and unable to travel any faster than he could have carried himself on his own 2 feet. Still, coach and King came through it all with only minor damage, and the windows were easily enough replaced. Though it has been used the most for state openings of Parliament, simply by virtue of how often they happen, the coach is perhaps more famous for its appearance during coronations and jubilees, when it carries the monarch and their consort, if they have one, through the streets of London to and or from Westminster Abbey. It has performed this function at every coronation since the crowning of William IV and Queen Adelaide in 1831, and here you can see some images of it in use on Queen Victoria's big day in 1838. She was still unmarried at this point, so Prince Albert wasn't there. A comical recreation of Edward VII and Queen Alexandra's coronation in 1902. That of their son, George V, and his wife Queen Mary in 1911. Their granddaughter, Elizabeth II, in 1953 with her husband Prince Philip, and their son, Charles III, in 2023 with Queen Camilla. To the best of my knowledge, it has never been used by the monarch outside of the English capital, but that doesn't mean it has never left London. During World War II, it was evacuated to Mentmore in Buckinghamshire for its own protection, returning after the war. Unfortunately, for all its beauty and history, the gold state coach has not proven popular as a means of transport for the monarchs and their consorts. This is because it is sprung on leather straps, making it an incredibly uncomfortable ride. As well as an up and down bouncing motion, it also rocks from side to side. William IV likened it to being, quote, aboard a ship tossing in a rough sea, while his niece, Queen Victoria, who had used it quite frequently in her younger days, shied away from it as she got older and bemoaned its distressing oscillation. George VI called it one of the most uncomfortable rides I have ever had in my life, while his daughter, Elizabeth II, summed it up as horrible when she recalled using it on the day of her coronation, saying that it really wasn't designed for travel. It's not built to hold much heat either, and despite being crowned in June, Elizabeth had to take a hot water bottle with her, strapped to the seat, as the weather was unseasonably cold and wet, and she was required to be in the carriage for hours while it drove around central London. I don't know if she shared the hot water bottle with the Duke of Edinburgh, I'm afraid, but he might have been expected to just lump it. It is perhaps little wonder that it was pulled through the city unoccupied in 2022 at the time of her Platinum Jubilee, with a hologram of Elizabeth on her coronation day projected onto its windows, rather than subjecting the then 96-year-old monarch to another journey in it. In May 2023, when Charles III was crowned, it was only used for the return journey from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace, to spare the King and Queen Camilla from being jostled around and potentially having a nasty case of motion sickness minutes before one of the most important ceremonies of their lives. For the journey to the Abbey, they instead travelled in this, the aluminium Diamond Jubilee coach, which comes complete with air conditioning, electric windows and hydraulic suspension. No leather straps here. If you'd like to get a little look inside it, see the BBC article I've linked in the description box for you, which includes a short video that will show you this very modern coach in more detail. Most of the time, the gold state coach now resides in the Royal Mews at Buckingham Palace, which is where I viewed it, and it is stored in the room on the other side of the wall you see indicated here by the arrow. On the rare occasion when it is wheeled out, just getting it out of that room is a major undertaking, requiring the removal of a window frame and the opening up of a section of wall. I hope you'll agree, though, that it is a spectacular piece of material history, and worth the effort just once in a while to get it out and show it off. That's it for this week, but let me know in the comments below what your favourite piece of decor on the coach is. And to hear more about some of the monarchs who have ridden in it, try one of these videos next. I'll be back next week, and until then, keep learning.